Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to another Rome 2 3v3 battle that has been sent to me by another viewer. Actually the same viewer, but you know, that's how it goes sometimes. So anyway, this is an interesting one in that, unlike the last one, this has all factions that I think are extremely strong. We've got the Arverni, the Tylus, and the Romans on this one side. You can see the Tylus is actually split into two parts, it's not a 4v3. Over here we've got the Iceni, the Arverni, and the Boii. Now, given these faction selections, I actually give a slight edge to this side over here, the ones with the Romans and the Tylus, just because they're slightly stronger than their counterparts, but not by much. Arverni and Iceni are very, very close, but I typically find that the Iceni are just slightly weaker than the Arverni in a lot of situations, and that's mostly because of the unit matchups. I mean, you've got things like the painted ones. They're a little bit more expensive for not any better performance than Naked Warriors, for example. And then, of course, you've got the Heroic Nobles, which aren't as good as Oathsworn. They're a little bit cheaper, so that could potentially make up for it. What sort of makes Iceni unique is the inclusion of chariots. But personally, I don't like them. They require too much click drag through. I usually find that I get better results personally with cavalry because I don't like using that mechanic. In fact, I pretty much never do. So, and even with that mechanic, they're so vulnerable to missile fire that they tend to be pretty easily killed. So we've got them. We've got Tylus, which you've heard my thoughts about them. This time it's mostly Oathsworn and other sort of smaller, lighter units like these Thracian warriors, which have a very high shock value but less staying power. And of course over here they've got some Gale of Thracian infantry. Those are, again, units that are decent, but I actually really like the tribal warriors, which are missing from this particular composition. They've got for their skirmishing component just some raiding horsemen, nothing too great for skirmishing component from Tylus as usual. It's a little bit peculiar that they bother taking cavalry raiding horsemen at all, but they can actually work out okay in melee combat by contrast to some other units. Pay for that by not being the best at melee for, ranged combat either, but that's the way it is sometimes. Over here we've got the Romans. Typical sort of Roman stuff here, lots and lots of legionary cohort. First cohort along one side there for some reason, first cohort there, armored legionaries. Now the reason that they've done these upgrades is simply because some of the units, he probably just had enough cash to upgrade a couple of his units, so that's what he's gotten and done. He's got auxiliary Syrian archers and Socii Equites, 3 of them. And now, personally, I prefer the Socii Equites Extraordinarii, and I would have replaced the first cohorts to get that, but that's just my preference. Zooming over to the other side real quick over here, we've got the Boii. We've got some heavy horse over on this flank, and they've got backup from these Arverni heavy horse for some reason. Not really entirely sure why they need to have them all over there. I'm guessing that they want them sort of around the flanks, but not a whole lot over here that they can really flank around with, because all they'd be doing is getting kited by raiding horsemen. They've got plenty of things like these Levy Freemen over here, nice little line of them. They've got these Celtic Slingers, pretty easy to skirmish against Tylus because they don't have any skirmishing component, obviously. They've got Sword Followers, which are a very decent sword unit. They've got Celtic Warriors sort of mixed in there as well. So it's a basic mix of that sort of stuff. They've got Oathsworn, 2 units of those, and then they've got the more Sword Followers back there. So this is a pretty solid line of Boii, just using the sort of mid-range heavy infantry backed up by some Oathsworn. Got some backing from some Savage Dogs and some heavy horse from the Arverni, of course. So moving on to the Arverni in general, they have got some Celtic Skirmishers. Now there are actually Gaelic Hunters, 3 of them if I recall correctly, that are invisible at this point in time because they're a stealth unit. I don't like his deployment here, but he's got Chosen Spearmen, Chosen Swordsmen, decent line of those Chosen Swordsmen, some Levy Freemen, some Naked Warriors, some Oathsworn anchoring that flank, and some Spear Nobles anchoring that flank. His general, of course, in an Oathsworn. So he's actually got some more units hidden around in here. I believe that he was the player that also has some cavalry hidden away. There's a little bit of like light horse. I believe that was that actually might be Boii light horse that's hidden somewhere, but we'll have to see later. The Iceni player over here got pretty much your typical Iceni stuff here. He's got 3 units of Britain Slingers, very weak, but very typical slinger unit. He's got the Sword Band Levy Freeman in the center, Sword Band over there as well, very cheap units. And then he's got the Heroic Nobles, and then mostly Chosen Sword Band, which is what I think is pretty good for the Iceni player. And then he's got 1 painted warrior, or painted ones. I actually prefer either more Levy Freeman if I'm going more defensive, or more painted warriors, painted ones. Personally, but that's up to preference. He's got a Chosen Spear Band, which is the only thing I really disagree with. He's got mostly just veteran riders. I think that they match favorably against heavy horse, but not like super well. Like I think they're pretty comparable units. But he's also got these chariots over here, and this general and these heroic nobles as well. So pretty typical Britain stuff. And last but not least, we get back to the Arverni. I believe I didn't say what they have. They've got mostly a mix of these chosen swordsmen and these Celtic warriors. They've got a front line of these Celtic slingers, and they've got their general in the Oathsworn, Levy Freeman backing him up, and same thing over here with the other Oathsworn units. So pretty solid lineup from the Arverni player over here. Stuff that you would typically sort of expect to see. I do think that the Arverni player on this side over here has a slight edge in terms of just performance and hitting power against the Iceni player, but we'll have to see how that goes. Now, Tylus has basically opened up this gap. They've decided that it's not worth trying to protect that. The Arverni player is starting to move forward. Now, the first time I saw this, I was pretty sure that they probably have some additional units, but I wasn't 100% sure. So, this was sort of where I was wondering. It's like, do they have some maybe units just cost more than I thought they did? I wasn't really sure, but turns out that they did indeed have some stealthed units, which, you know, are going to be a part of this battle. I don't know how much they ended up playing personally in the end, but it's always good to use all of your units effectively as possible. Over here, Boii are sort of moving to threaten the Roman flank, and because Tylus only had half of their army there, he is moving quite rapidly to fill in that void and to move around to guard this side of the battlefield, although he is moving some of his units of these Gale Thracian infantry to support over here. Not 100% sure why. His Oathsworn are over there as well. Over here, the Levy Freemen are getting shot at by the Celtic Slingers, who are now backing off. It's nice to actually absorb those shots with the Levy Freemen. They're very inexpensive, and it doesn't really matter if you lose those units. If enemies run out of ammunition firing at things like Levy Freemen, that's actually perfectly, you know, good for the person getting hit. Not good for the Levy Freemen, of course, but that is the way it is. And of course, they can also be used to skirmish a little bit. They've got decent javelins as well. So, we've got some skirmish engagements going on here. Those Syrian archers for the Romans are extremely good, able to pick away at these Celtic skirmishers who got a little bit too close. I'm not entirely sure what the reasoning behind it was, but I think they were going in to just try and figure out if they could get a good angle, throw some javelins or something like that. Levy Freeman over here trying to hit these Romans a little bit, I suspect, with a couple of the... Or sorry, those are on the side of the Romans I'm talking about. To hit these Celtic warriors, possibly with some javelins, but they're being pushed back a little bit now. They're pushed very far forward as screens. Here we can see these, where are they? Gaelic hunters sort of popping in and out of the fog of war now. They're going to start opening fire relatively soon, if I recall. Maybe there's only 2 of them. I thought there was 3 of them. I guess there's only 2 of them. They are an interesting unit. They will lose, however, to Syrian, the Syrian archers. Damn it. Just ignore that. But anyway, they're getting some good shots to the sides of these first cohort, and you can see the first cohort taking some losses already, which is not good. He doesn't want those ones to be the ones taking losses. I suspect that maybe the reason he brought these Celtic skirmishers up forward is because he wanted to make sure that these Gaelic hunters didn't get overwhelmed right away too easily. Over here, it looks like the Iceni are starting their engagement. You can see that the Arverni are perfectly willing to match them charge for charge. Celtic warriors have charged into, basically, I think, Celtic warriors, swordband into Celtic warriors, so the swordband will clean that up if I recall correctly. And this is basically just going to turn into a mess real quickly. A lot of the Celtic slingers on the Arverni side are getting battered away by these Celtic ones, so that's sort of what they've opted to hit with those. Chariots still in the back. This is going to be a fairly fast battle once things start going here. The Romans are sort of locked into an engagement here with the Arverni, and the Boii are starting to come around the flanks. Protected a little bit by Tylus, but what this has done is it's left a big gap here that the Iceni are not going to be able to cover. The Chosen Swordband over here are getting absolutely decimated by the Oathsworn and the Celtic warriors, and now they're getting worse than decimated as they've been chopped right in half. Swordband are just running sacrificially right up front here, trying to stop these Gale Thracian infantry from doing too much damage to them. Fortunately, one of them is only a Levy Freeman, but that doesn't really stop the fact that there's also Oathsworn over there. Basically, they're just in trouble. We've got lots and lots of sling fire heading in towards these Oathsworn now, just focus firing on that. We've got the chariots around back here that are trying to move into these Celtic slingers, trying to take them down as quickly as possible, but you do see these chariots do go down pretty quickly to missile fire, so you have to be quite careful about that. They've also sort of started swinging around into the back of this fight to try and swing that, and the Iceni, even though they are doomed here, are going to be putting together quite a decent offense. Heavy Horse here and Levy Freeman fighting against these veteran riders. It's surprising that the veteran riders are as poor off as they are, but I think they've already seen off some units. Heavy Horse over here beating these veteran riders quite badly. So yeah, the Iceni player is basically doomed here. He's been pinned off. He's fighting one whole faction plus a good chunk of Tylus's reinforcements. Over here you can see the engagement between Arverni and Rome has started here. And I mean, you've got all sorts of crazy stuff going on. Like you've got this Oathsworn running around the side here going for these cavalry before they'll probably go to these armored legionaries. They've managed to protect their ranged units a little bit okay. Gaelic hunters are starting to get picked apart, but I mean, it doesn't matter tremendously since there's no longer a skirmishing aspect to this game. Most people are just heading into melee combat. They've left some gaps here that are going to be exploited eventually, but Levy Freeman breaking at the front, the remainder of the Oathsworn and so on and so forth are going to be doing much, much better. Naked Warriors got a good charge, if I recall, and managed to get some good kills against the Legionary cohort, but will start to slowly find that battle turning against them. So now that the battle has been joined in the way it is, you're going to start seeing the Arverni player having to get a bit creative. Chosen Swordsman running into the Legionary cohort along the side here, and this cavalry is basically done for. There's not much left that they're going to be able to do. Sokia Equites over here are doing surprisingly well at surviving. Celtic Skirmishers getting more good volleys against these Sokia Equites. One more will probably win that particular fight. Here the Boii have managed to get around the back of the Roman army as well as simultaneously slam into these Thracian warriors to a certain extent. Sword followers are going to beat Thracian warriors if the Thracian warriors do not get a charge, and here you can see that that is exactly what has happened. Thracian warriors without a charge are completely doomed against something like tribal sword followers, sort of anything really, basically. Over here you can see the Romans are starting to clean up the things that have charged right into that front line, but they're being followed up with a lot of sword followers from the Boii, which are going to do an amazing job. They're going to get a huge number of kills in this fight. Over here you can see these legionary cohorts are kind of getting pressed down, and again, Gallo-Thracian infantry not getting any charges there. That's less relevant for Gallo-Thracian infantry. They're a little bit more durable on just a punch-up fight. Over here you can see that you know, as predicted, the Iceni have gotten cleaned up. There's not a whole lot they could do at that point in time. There's simply too many forces compressed up against them and specifically fighting against them. Arverni over here, not necessarily doing the best job, but the sword follower charge from the Boii player was decisive. Over here you can see that they've also engaged some of their warriors, Celtic warriors in particular and sword followers, against things like Thracian warriors. These Thracian warriors got much better charges, so they've got much better results. Got the raiding horsemen doing some fighting as well. Celtic warriors breaking through, fighting these Thracian warriors at this point in time. It's not a great charge, so they're not going to get any great kills, but these Celtic warriors chasing after this cavalry, it's going to basically be free kills for those Thracian warriors. Oathsworn for the Boii in the background here are going to be able to really be a decisive thing for them later on in this fight, potentially, but you can see that Rome, having broken through almost all of the Arverni lines, is going to start turning more of their attention towards these sword followers, but it's a little bit too late in a certain sense. They've got so few of their legionaries in good order right now that's going to be just really painful for them. Now, Arverni needs to get this cavalry, the heavy horse, into these auxiliary Syrian archers. They just cause too much pain if they let them stand unopposed for too much longer. Over here, we can find the last little bits of Thracian warriors and Gallo-Thracian infantry getting cleaned off the board here, and you can see the sword followers over here showing their worth by finally finishing through these 2 units of Thracian warriors. That was part of a larger fight, but still, these sword followers have done a fantastic job of breaking those 2 units. Levy Freeman coming in from the rear as well. So all that's really left are these Thracian warriors, and then they'll have the ability to turn all their attention to the remaining Arverni players' units. Tylus's units just aren't the sort that are going to prove decisive. The only one that's left that's really good is the Oathsworn and this Gallo-Thracian infantry, which is pretty full health, and this other unit of Oathsworn. But both of those units of Oathsworn are kind of battered, so the one thing that's not going to help, like the raiding horsemen, pretty much out of ammunition. They're not going to be decisive anymore. Celtic slingers, on the other hand, do need to be screened against them, so that is something that is going to happen there. one of the heavy horses being pulled out so that they can try and guard these Celtic skirmishers, as the Celtic skirmishers throw all of their slings and arrows into the raiding horsemen. You can see that the cavalry is charging in there to join in. The Celtic slingers are going to be able to pelt these raiding horsemen in melee combat as they're locked down, so that's going to be a lot of damage to them very, very quickly. Is a smart use of these raiding horsemen, but he needs to split these units around so that two of them can go around and try and kill these Celtic slinger units as well. But suffice to say, we've got sword followers here still trying to fight through here, and we've got one of the Oathsworn probably about to go down. The Arverni Oathsworn is pretty much done for here, just completely surrounded, compacted, nothing left that they can really do to win this fight. But on the other hand, it is stopping the combat from happening for a little while, so from these units rallying and moving elsewhere where they could be potentially more useful. Heavy Horse has moved in, and now they've finally gotten to these Celtic slingers. Basically going to be the end of it, but the damage has been done to a certain extent. These raiding horsemen have all been eliminated from the fight. Over here, got Oathsworn fighting pretty much nothing really. Chosen Swords over there, but Oathsworn over here are now out of the fight. Not the general's unit, so it's not too bad, but it is still pretty bad. Sword followers chasing after some skirmishers. They won't really likely catch them and kill them, but you never know. They really needed to use those cavalry to pick off those ranged units, and they still have those ranged units. Either way, Oathsworn back here hanging out. They don't want to commit it necessarily. They're going to do so now that their front line has been broken, and they need to protect those Syrian archers. But the unit for this general is so battered that they're going to have a little bit of trouble here, taking some casualties. And you can see that, like, Boii is really pulling his weight in this fight here. Heavy Horse getting caught on the edge of those Levy Freemen, taking some losses and then pulling back out. Skirmishers have managed to survive here. Levy Freemen wiping out those Heavy Horse along with the volley from those skirmishers. And you can sort of see how just messy this particular fight is. That's why I didn't focus on the excitement that was the Iceni fight. Boii General has finally sort of moved into combat and is fighting a first cohort. They'll be able to win this fight eventually pretty easily, but especially once these Levy Freemen break, the Roman general is going to start taking fire, if I recall correctly, from skirmishers, and that is indeed what happens. I would still love to see that cavalry going after these skirmishers. I think that that's something that they need to start thinking about clearing out, but as you can see, that's not what's happening. Some of the infantry does get into them, though. I would have preferred seeing that infantry going into these armored legionaries. It would have been a much more efficient use of them. They are getting some of the cavalry into these auxiliary Syrians archers, but they're getting shot by these Celtic slingers as well, so I mean that wasn't the best or safest choice of target. Still, they'll take out some of these auxiliary Syrian archers. Roman general over there is forced to flee the battle. Unfortunately for the sword followers over here, I think they're getting picked away as well, so they might shatter relatively soon. Lots of these sort of Roman units in complete disarray and pretty much off the battlefield. The Heavy Horse over here, after getting shot by skirmishers, is going to try and do one last charge into these auxiliary Syrian archers and is going to shatter on contact essentially once these sword followers get nearby, unfortunately, but it is long enough for the sword followers to catch up to the auxiliary Syrian archers. Not going to be quite enough as the auxiliary Syrians pull away from that fight, but now there's only this one small unit of skirmishers that's not going to be enough. The Oathsworn back here are going to get caught up. The Oathsworn over here are already caught up. And while these Oathsworn are getting showered and pelted by these Celtic slingers while they're fighting these other Oathsworn, that's not going to stop them from winning this combat or this fight, so that is a little bit too little too late. And at this point in time, it's going to just be a relatively clean cleanup for the Boii against the remaining skirmishers of the Arverni, and you can see that they've just sort of all routed there. So very, very fast-paced and exciting replay there that got sent in. Lots and lots of deaths on all sides. Let's take some time to look at what we've got for casualties and performance for all the different units for these different factions. You can see over here that Tylus. Gale Thracian infantry, some of them did extremely, extremely well. I suspect it was mostly these units running down Celtic units, the Iceni units that were retreating. The Thracian warriors, because they didn't get very good or clean charges, did fairly poorly. Some of them did okay, depending on that, but you can definitely tell that some of them didn't get very solid or clean charges, with only 13 kills there. Raiding horsemen, did a pretty decent job. Came after the right targets. I think that he could have definitely gotten way more kills if he had split the cavalry and gone after the different slinger units at that point in time. Oathsworn did very, very poorly in this particular match, and I guess that's just because of the way the tides of the battle were going there. The Arverni player on this side, you can see that their Oathsworn did a lot better. And, you know, I think that Oathsworn can usually eke out more kills than 100, but 280 is definitely a very high amount. For Heavy Horse, did fairly variably. I think it depended on what they were fighting. Celtic Slingers, don't expect much out of them. They didn't do too much, as per usual. One of these Celtic Warriors really did well, quite surprisingly, in fact. Chosen Swordsman, fairly disappointing, but they were against their equal in the Iceni, and then the Levy Freemen over here, you know, they did pretty well. I suspect most of that was through Javelin Fire. Romans over here, you can see that there was a really disappointing performance across most of these Roman units, and you can sort of see what they were fighting. The Armored Legionaries did extremely well, and the first cohort did extremely well, and one of the unit of Legionary cohorts did very well as well, but a lot of what they had going for them was kind of negated in the fight that they ended up having when a lot of their units sort of got encircled and flanked nearer to the end. They did do well on that one flank, though, against the Arverni player, defeating the Arverni general pretty soundly, managing to envelop around him. And, of course, the Syrian archers did an extremely good job managing to rack up over 100 kills with 2 units. Very good for a ranged unit in Rome. Socii Equites, one of them did very well. I don't actually know what he was killing, but the remainder did fairly poorly, and that's pretty typical of things like Socii Equites, and it's why I prefer the Socii Equites Extraordinary. You can usually get in 70s or 80s in kills fairly reliably. Over here, we've got the Arverni. A lot less kills for his general there. That was the one that got surrounded and encircled by the Romans. Still 120 kills. That's not great for an Arverni general. He's got 160 on the other Oathsworn unit that was on his left flank. That did a much better job. And you can sort of see the general gist of this Arverni army didn't do particularly well engaging those Romans from the front. Over here, we got the Iceni. They've got 242 kills on their chariots. They were doing mostly pull-through nonsense, but they were also mostly fighting light skirmishers, so that's not too unexpected a number. The veteran raiders did quite poorly. It looks like they were getting outmatched by the heavy horse a little bit. Heroic nobles fighting against more than their match, 135 on the general, 119 on the general, 135 on the other. Not really that surprising numbers. They've got a lot of kills with their Briton slingers, considering how crappy they are. Chosen Spearband, I would never have I wouldn't have taken those. They're just not any good. Same with these sword bands. I would have replaced the Chosen Spearband to upgrade the sword bands into something else. Painted ones managed to get a decent number of kills. They're a relatively expensive unit, surprisingly, but they're not so expensive that you can't just charge them in with all their abilities active and expect a good amount of kills. That's sort of how I think that they should be used. Got Chosen Swordband doing variably. They were, again, against pretty much their equal. Levy Freeman doing what they sort of do. But let's move on to the Boii. These were the ones who were like the real heroes of this battle, in my opinion. They've got both their Oathsworn getting almost 200 kills or almost 300 kills. That's just a ton of kills on those Oathsworn, mostly defeating sort of wavering or near defeat units, being the decisive hammer to take those out quickly. Heavy Horse getting fairly low kills there, as the Celtic Slingers managed to get a decent respectable number on some of them, depending on which ones got hit by the cavalry. This is the one that got slammed into by all those raiders. Celtic Warriors did pretty damn well considering what they are and what they do. The Levy Freemen did what they do. They always get this kind of sort of number. This is a little bit higher than everyone else's, but, you know, you're never going to see like hundreds of kills on Levy Freeman. Sword Followers, this is where things get a little bit crazy, because this is sort of a mid-tier decent unit, because of the angles that they were going at, because of the charges that they were getting against, in particular, the Thracian warriors. Like, they were getting great charges against those Thracian warriors, which really is decisive in this sort of fight. These Sword Followers managed to rack up huge, like, unrealistic numbers of kills. So they managed to just really pull it through for this faction here. So anyway, that's my analysis of these games. I hope you found them enjoyable, and of course, as always, I hope to see you all next time.